Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affairs Analysis for 25th December 2019. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. These are the articles that we'll be dealing today. The first article for the day is taken from the Hindu and it is titled History, Technology and the Shackles of the Present. This is a critical article about the historical development of science and technology in our country, and the present status of democracy is being compared with the times that India went through during emergency era. So the basic premise of the article is this: the scientific development versus democratic rights. Now how the growth and evolution of Digital India vision is compared to the National Committee on Science and Technology during emergency era is the basic premise of this article. Before beginning the article, let us have a brief understanding about what is Digital India's vision. India is amongst the top 2 countries globally, just behind China, on many dimensions of digital adoption. By 2022, it is expected that India's digital economy is likely to cross 1 trillion. So this was the focus of the recently concluded India Digital Summit 2019, which was held in New Delhi as well. So going forward, the summit deliberated on what India needs to do to become a $1 trillion digital economy. So in that context, let us have a look at this article and how democratic rights are equally important for the growth of science and technology in a country. So how exactly is internet shaping democracy? Basically, internet gives interested citizens better access to the information, which allows them to have an impact on public policy. So this is the fundamental premise on which this article is based. So this author analyzes the irony of analyzing technologies that would unshackle the Indian economy when even the basic rights of the citizens are being trampled upon. So he goes back to the emergency era, during which the National Committee on Science and Technology was established to deliberate upon the future of science, to use science and technology for solving developmental problems. At that particular point of time, there was a futurology committee. So this committee, which was a part of NCST, created long-term projections for the many sectors of our economy, including transportation as well. Now before getting into the transportation issue, let us have a look at what this futurology means. Futurology generally means the use of computer models for forecasting scenarios, and this was started by a club of Rome. They published a famous report called the Limits to Growth report in 1972, which became the basis for future discussions on sustainable development and how to consider environment as a part of our economic decisions. So this futurology committee was speaking about the transportation problems of our country. They were twofold mainly. One is the number of vehicles, and secondly, it is the dependency of oil and petroleum on the oil producing economies. So this committee recommended that we look forward to development of e-vehicle technology and other renewable sources of fuel. Ironically, when the government is deliberating upon such high-end technology as long ago as 1970s, the computer era was just entering its first phase. And it is exactly during this very phase the government was very reluctant to adopt technology and adopt computers in its mainstream public sector units. So this ironical trend is visible even right now, according to this author. So just like in the case of emergency era, when they were deliberating upon e-vehicle technology, which was nowhere in its initial stages of development, yet they had the vision to develop such kind of transportation system in the country. On the other hand, the government was trying to disown computer adoption. So in a similar trend right now, when India is talking about Digital India, we also witness the highest number of internet shutdowns across any democracy in the last 1 year. So this is antithetical to the concept of using Digital India as a technological development, as a technological force for future economic development, when you shut down internet and trample upon the rights of the citizens. That is the basic premise of this article. The next article for the day is taken from the Indian Express and it is titled Why NPR isn't NRC and Yet. So this is an explainer which tries to explain the difference between National Population Register as well as the envisioned National Register of Indian citizens. So what is the difference? Is this the first ever exercise of National Population Register? No. So let us have a look into the details. What exactly is this NPR? The legal definition of National Population Register is given by the Ministry of Home Affairs. According to the ministry, it is a list of usual residents of a country. Now, who are these usual residents? According to the ministry, if a person who has been residing in a local area declares himself as a resident of that area for the last 6 months or declares his intention to stay in a particular area for the next 6 months, he is called an usual resident according to the definition of the ministry. Now, NPR is not a citizenship drive. Why is it so? Because even foreign nationals staying in locality for more than 6 months will be counted as a part of this. So this is the fundamental difference between NPR and NRC. NRC tries to include Indians and exclude everyone else, whereas NPR is very inclusive in nature because it tries to include even the foreigners who are residing in a particular area. Now, what is the legal basis for NPR? According to the ministry, it is mandatory for every usual resident of India to register in the NPR as per the provisions of the Citizenship Act 1955 and the ensuing rules created under this act by the name of Registration of Citizens and Issue of National Identity Card Rules in 2003. So how is this linked to census? In the first phase of the census, there happens a phase called house listing phase. It is during this phase that even NPR is conducted. As per the provisions of the Citizenship Act, the government has the power to maintain a register of Indian citizens. So NPR is always considered as the first step towards maintaining this register. The Minister of State for the Ministry of Home Affairs has mentioned on the floor of the House that NPR is a prerequisite for the larger vision of NRIC. So what makes this NPR controversial? It is the issue of privacy caused by the inclusion of new items of survey. These include information regarding PAN, Aadhaar, passport, driving license, etc. Though the ministry says these are voluntary in nature, there have been many apprehensions as to the need for such kind of data. The grander vision of the government is to create a single national card which acts as an identity card. This was envisaged even by our ex-Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee to create a national single identity card by merging all the databases of identity. So NPR is seen as a project towards this end. Previously, there was NPR project that was carried out in 2010 along with the first phase of census. However, it took a back seat because Aadhaar was given more priority by the new government and it was revived only after the August 3rd notification by the Registrar General of India this year. The main question is this: will the NPR be followed up with NRIC? That is the main contentious question here. The ministry says NPR need not be followed up with NRIC and the present government has no plans about a nationwide NRC. The last aspect to know about, which is very important from prelims perspective, is a politically motivated action of defying centre's orders on NPR by Kerala and West Bengal, which declared that they shall not participate in NPR exercise. Well, the fact is, citizenship and NPR issues are a part of union list. So the centre has the sole right to declare whether they can go forward with an NPR exercise or not. State governments do not have any say. However, with withdrawal of their support from carrying out this exercise, due to lack of human resources in those particular states, the process might be slowed down. That is the only problem. So this is in brief about NPR. The next article for the day is taken from Live Mint, and it is about how RBI has sent payment banks on a road to extinction. In general, there are two kinds of banking licenses that are granted by the Reserve Bank of India. First one is universal bank license and the second one is differentiated bank license. So this differentiated bank license is granted to banks that serve the needs of a certain demographic segment of the population. Now small finance banks and payment banks along with custodian banks and wholesale banks are the four different kinds of differentiated banks recognized by RBI under its license regime. So differentiated banks versus universal banks, what is the difference? These differentiated banks are distinct from the universal banks because they are infused with niche segments. Niche banks typically target a specific market and tailor the bank's operations to this market segment preferences only. The differentiation could be on the account of capital requirement or the scope or activities or areas of operation. As such, they offer a very limited range of services and products and functions under a different regulatory dispensation. Now, if we notice the evolution, the concept of differentiated banks is not entirely new. In fact, the urban cooperative banks or the primary agricultural credit societies, the regional rural banks and local area banks could be considered as differentiated banks because they operated in very localized areas themselves. But the present concept of differentiated banks can be said as something that evolved after 2007. So RBI granted in principle approvals to 11 entities for setting up payment banks in between August 2015 and now, and 10 for small finance banks in September 2015. Now what are these small finance banks? Let us have a look. In order to understand the criticism of this article, let us try to understand the scope of activities of payment bank. Generally, the objective of setting up a payment bank will be to further financial inclusion by providing small saving account, and secondly by remittances services to migrant labor workforce, low income households, small business and other unorganized sector entities. So they will not lend to customers and will have to deploy their funds. You have to note this point very clearly. Small finance banks cannot lend. Secondly, they have a regulation that 75% is the SLR and they also have to maintain CRR norms. Now the author of this article quotes this particular provision as problematic because the very premise of a payment bank is that they can lend and make some profits out of it because they have a very large customer base, and Paytm like wallets will be an attractive mode of financial transaction for these small value customers. But because of the fact that they are not allowed to lend almost 75%, more than 75% in fact, because of the CRR norms as well, they cannot make a proper business model because no bank without the activity of lending can prosper. So now the two payment banks, namely Paytm as well as India Post, are now converting themselves into small finance banks. This article criticizes the approach. With the present regulatory structure, what it has essentially done is every large company with a significant user base has made it easy to start a wallet and have information regarding their financial transactions easy rather than allowing some other payment banks to have that information. So Amazon, Jio and various other companies which have significant user base have created their own wallets with the help of KYC architecture created by RBI. So the very idea of differentiated banking which was created by RBI is being killed by the regulatory rigidity of RBI. The author suggests that It is the suspicion created by the crony capitalists that stopped RBI from following a policy that would have encouraged the payment banking ecosystem in the country. So just by giving namesake licenses and then following up with stringent norms like 75% SLR, the RBI has eventually led to the demise of the payment banking system according to the author. So there is a danger that this might replicate in the small finance banking system as well. So RBI must make enough measures to ensure that does not happen. So RBI must be wary of looking at private shareholding as a negative point, rather they should be leveraging the plus points that these private shareholdings have and help the ecosystem. It requires a lot of proactive activism from RBI, and timely, vigilant, proactive governance should be exhibited by RBI rather than developing this phobia of private bank ownership. The last article for the day is taken from Live Mint and it is titled Indian Armed Forces set to get their first Chief of Defence Staff. This August 15th, the Prime Minister has announced that there shall be a Chief of Defence Staff for the three services: the Indian Army, the Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force. So this Chief of Defence Staff is a post that will act as a single point advisor to the PM on all the issues relating to coordination between the three forces. So what is the need for a Chief of Defence Staff? Let us try to understand. The first issue is that of policy coherence. So generally the policy formulation is done by Defence Secretary, who is a bureaucrat, while its execution rests with the Chief of Armed Forces. So there is a mismatch between the needs of the armed forces and the policy. So this makes defence policy incoherent. To correct that anomaly, Chief of Defence Staff is envisaged as an institution to solve this problem. Secondly, there is a trend of evolving modern warfare, and the emergence of modern warfare demands an integrated approach, especially in the context of space and cyber warfare. So this new defence strategy requires an integrated approach, and CDS will act as a nodal point to solve this problem. Thirdly, there was a group of ministers that was formed in 2001 to explore what are the various reforms needed for improving India's national security scenario. So these group of ministers also recommended a Chief of Defence Staff. And in 2012, Naresh Chandra Task Force recommended the appointment of a CDS. The permanent chairman of Chief of Staff Committee is the senior most of the three chiefs, according to this recommendation. And in 2016, DB Shekatkar Committee, which talked about various reforms in armed forces and the way our army is organized, also recommended CDS as one of the 99 recommendations it made towards this end. So all these recommendations apart, the significance is that it will create tri-service command. What do you mean by this tri-service theatre command? Basically, Army, Navy and Air Force largely work in silos. There is little coordination between these different wings of the armed forces in normal times. So in order to save money by avoiding duplication between the services, and also for better coordination and eventually the formation of tri-service theatre commands, CDS will act as a nodal point. So it will help in defence diplomacy as well, and as well as save money on our budgets.